Hello, Grand Rapids. Mayor Rosalynn Bliss here with our city manager, Mark Washington, and we are working to make sure that you have good information as we continue to wrestle with a lot of issues here in our city. One of the things that we started several months ago during the onset of COVID-19 was doing video blogs, so we're back at it again to provide some information. So we're going to start with that because we are all still living with a pandemic, and until there is a vaccine, we are going to be living with this for quite some time, I imagine. And so as we all adjust and pivot and figure out how to do that safely, we're doing that here at City Hall. We're doing it with a lot of partners in the community, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that you are supported. I know a lot of people in the community are struggling, and we're working with a lot of partners in town to make sure that there are resources available. But we're also doing some things here at City Hall as we reopen, like so many businesses throughout the community reopen. So with that, I'll turn it to our city manager so he can provide some updates to you.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, City Hall is open to the public. Many of our city services can be experienced both online and in person. We just ask that the public adheres to the executive order, and there are masks that are provided here in some instances, but please bring your own masks as you come and experience some of our city services and make sure that you maintain safe social distancing. We're also trying to be very supportive of many of the businesses that are reopening now. We know that the social districts have proven to be very effective. As you see some of the activity downtown and reopening, it's encouraging. And we just want to make sure that we continue to do it in a very safe manner.
Yeah, and so you will see changes throughout downtown and in our neighborhood districts. We know that being outside is a safer place for everyone. And so we want to encourage outside space to be used in a different way so that we can all support our local businesses, which is really important, especially during this time, but also that we can do it safely. The big thing that we ask is that you comply with the governor's order. So please wear your masks. And then also please continue to practice all those things that we know help mitigate the spread of COVID. We know a lot's going on related to COVID. One thing that we are concerned about is that the moratorium for evictions is being lifted. We know a lot of people have struggled financially during the pandemic and may not be able to pay their rent. We want to let you know that there's support for that. So if you are struggling, please reach out to 211. There's been some funds allocated at the state level as well to help with eviction prevention. And then that leads us to the second topic, which is housing. So we know that housing has long been an issue in our city, especially affordable housing, and we have been working on that issue for years. And recently we had an update on some of the work we've been doing with Housing Next. So I'll have city manager share information about that.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, and this is the first time we've been in the commission chambers in a long time, but we're not meeting on site on our regular meetings. We'll continue to interact virtually. But yes, yesterday, or this past week during our commission meeting, we had an update from Mr. Ryan Kilpatrick from Housing Next, who's been doing great work along with city staff and our other community partners in looking at our housing needs, and he's been able to complete the housing needs assessment. And we looked at the continuum of housing all the way from low income up until market rate housing. And what has been surprisingly helpful is us identifying specifically the problem. The estimate is that by 2025, we will need an additional 9,000 housing units in Grand Rapids to keep up with the demand and to make sure that the supply, a shortage of supply does not cause increasing housing prices or gentrification. And so that was very, very eye-opening, and the demand is not only at the low income or the affordable housing level, but the demand is for affordable housing at all, or housing supply at all levels throughout the housing continuum. And so we will be building on that work. City staff is evaluating the results of it. We'll be working more closely now with the Housing Advisory Committee that the City Commission has appointed, as well as making sure that we can be strategic in how we use the funding that has been set aside with the housing, the Affordable Housing Fund. Surprisingly, the number that was identified that the city should have minimally in the fund is around $20 million is what the study showed. And as you know, we've committed about $1 million of it, and some of that is for, we're going to be using now during COVID for rental assistance and ensuring resident resiliency. And so we know that we have a ways to go. In terms of ensuring stability, both in our housing supply and the housing fund, but we are off to a good start with solid information now on a true assessment of the problem. We look forward to working on that.
Yeah, thank you. And related to some of the other work that we've been doing that has taken up a lot of our time here at City Hall, we have been working on moving forward plans to allow recreational marijuana in the city. So for well over a year, we've had the opportunity for individuals to open up medical marijuana facilities. We have over 20 of those facilities that have been approved. Some of them will be able to convert pretty quickly to sell recreational marijuana because the City Commission supported a fast-track process for some of those facilities. But we know that we still have other work to do around zoning related to recreational marijuana and micro businesses. And so we've been working actively to do that. We had a discussion just this past week and gave some feedback to our planning director. The next steps in that process is it will now go to the Planning Commission. They'll make the final recommendations, then they'll come back to the City Commission before those are finalized. But our intent is to have all of that work done by the end of September so that we can move forward with applications by October 20th. An important part of that work has been our discussion around how do we embed equity into the cannabis industry. And so through the really good intentional work of a team here at the city, we have a plan for equity and justice in the cannabis industry, and we'll be hopefully moving that forward as quickly as possible as well, and you'll be able to learn more about that in the next couple of months.
Well, I must say, first of all, let me thank all of the city employees who have just been working very, very diligently and courageously during COVID, and that coupled now with a double pandemic, if you will, both the issues around COVID that has disproportionately impacted people of color, but also the broader issues around systemic racism that's occurred since the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and many others, has awakened the consciousness of our community and as well as our commission around things that we need to do to improve equity and inclusion, and specifically our services within the police department. And lots of discussions have occurred with reform. Our police department and our police chief has been very engaged with our community as well as with our officers. And I do want to thank our officers for their work during these very challenging times, both with COVID as well as with all of the issues, the concerns about policing across the country, and specifically what we are doing here in Grand Rapids. And several things have happened. Our oversight office has began to develop a strategic plan, and an update this past commission meeting was given at the Public Safety Committee. But the police department as well has been very intentionally listening to community, listening to commissioners, and have been trying to determine what actions to take in order to be responsive, both policy-wise as well as financially. And I know that there's a lot of conversations around defund the police department, and we've instituted a series of reforms. There were over 19 or 20 plus reforms that we've identified that we want to do to change policing in our community, or be more clear and transparent on how we police, for everything from de-escalation to other aspects of community engagement, to being accountable for the many, many, many studies that this community and the commission has gone through, but also right-sizing the budget is a term that I would use, because the first thing we want to do, at least from my perspective as manager, is to make sure we have a clear operational strategy for good police outcomes. Let me say that again. I want to make sure we have a good, clear vision and operational strategy for police outcomes. And then once you determine that, then like any other strategy, the budget follows strategy. So what I've done, the commission has, we've had several conversations that have evolved around the discussion of defunding the police department, of reducing the amount of funding from 39% of the general operating fund roughly to 32% as mandated, minimum 2% as mandated in charter. And what we will do is we're not going to make any progress by having an ad hoc conversation around that every week, but we're going to be very deliberate in the approach. And the first start of that approach is for the police chief to share his new, improved, revised strategic plan that he has been working very hard with his advisory committee, with members of the community, and he intends to do that on August 11th, along with the oversight office. And he'll talk about all the aspects of policing that needs enhancement or reform in this department, and we'll continue to have that conversation. That'll be the first draft unveiling August the 11th. There'll be feedback that we get from the commission. Obviously, the public will be able to share some feedback with the police chief. He'll take that in consideration and then come back in the month of September. Later in September, I believe the 29th, for his final draft of his strategic plan. Then we'll go into a broader conversation around the economy. There are financial pressures that, like on many of the small businesses, that are weighing on our organizations and on our many revenue streams within the city. And we'll talk with the City Commission holistically about how we're performing financially, as well as what outcomes and goals do we have for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as if there are need for mid-year adjustments. Mid-year adjustments to any of our city departments due to the financial strains on COVID or the reprioritization of goals. And ultimately, the City Commission will have an opportunity, as many have asked, to address the budget in a major way with mid-year budget amendments, possibly on December the 15th, or adopting the fiscal year 22 budget in May. So those will be the two opportunities to make those budget amendments. Some of the things just in preview that the police department is working on is really how do we incorporate the use of more mental health, behavioral health specialists in helping to co-respond to calls, whether they're high priority calls or assisting or leading in low priority calls, or working with other members of the community as ambassadors and collaborators, and just looking at different ways to reimagine how this community is policed. We have heard the sentiments from the community. We see the need to make responsible change, and we want to be very deliberate in doing so. And I think that's the conversation that's been at the commission. And Mayor, you may want to elaborate on at least some of the perspectives of your colleagues as well. But my commitment is to make sure we do this work deliberately. There are a lot of things that affect the legal operations of the police department, the financial operations of that department, as well as the way that we communicate and engage with our community. We've also appreciate the City Commission in approving additional resources for the Oversight Office, as well as the Police Department, to have more civilianization, as well as improve our communications and engagement.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager. Well, I'll add a few things. One is, first, I support the process that the City Manager has laid out. We need to be incredibly thoughtful and deliberative as we make significant changes in our community. And for me, as an elected official, I'm always wrestling with these complex issues, and the last thing I want to do is make a decision that is going to have unintended consequences or a negative impact on our community. And so having all of the information and really being thoughtful puts me in a place where I feel like I can make an informed decision. As an elected official and as your mayor, I think it would be irresponsible for me to make dramatic decisions without sitting with them and having all of the information at hand that is needed, as well as having a vision of what we're going to do differently. That is where there is consensus around the City Commission table. The City Commission is committed to meaningful, structural, and long-term change that will address the systemic racism that we know exists, and we're committed to police reform. And how we get there and what those outcomes are, I think, are really critical, and we need to have those conversations, and we need to engage the community in those conversations in a thoughtful way. And that's what we're committed to doing, and the timeline and the process that the city manager laid out, I believe will help us get there. And with that said, I also want to say that we have been working as a community on issues around policing for years. And it didn't just start a few weeks ago. Some of the issues we have pushed forward much more quickly over the last several weeks, but I believe that the work that we're doing and the work that we've done as a community has been absolutely essential and has set a foundation for the work that we have ahead. So I hope that you take some time to get an update from our Office of Public Oversight and Accountability. That recommendation for that office came from community, and it is now staffed with an incredible director, and we're going to build, the City Commission supported actually shifting funding from the police department to add capacity and staff to that office so that they can do the important work that they're charged to do. That's one of the things that are moving us in the right direction, yet we know that there's a lot more work to do. There have been a lot of words that have been thrown out, but the one that I and some of my colleagues share is this, how do we reimagine policing in our community? And how do we eliminate the racialized outcomes? That's ultimately what we want to happen. How do we look at investment in our communities of color and do that in a very intentional way that has a positive impact on our community and on individuals and families? And so that's the work ahead of us. We can't do it alone. This really is a community effort in partnership with our chief and the Office of Oversight and city staff. And we need to make sure that we have time to do that and to do it well.
Mayor, and speaking of racialized outcomes, this year has been very difficult because of the pandemic, both double pandemics, but also we're starting to see an uptick in violent crimes, and specifically in homicides. And we are at our 20th homicide of the year, and we're just halfway into the year. Last year we had 18 for the entire year. And this year, unless things drastically change, it will be an historic number that I feel for every victim of those tragedies and those family members. My heart and prayers go out to them. But we do need some accountability, not only in the police department, but we need accountability in the community as well. We need our community to help police itself, to cooperate with law enforcement. The men and women in this department, they are committed. When I tell you they're committed, I know that they are committed to helping to keep this community safe. They want to police with you. Now, we've had our fair share of incidents in terms of where there has been a lack of trust that's based on use of force incidents, but those comparatively, when I look at other communities and they're having fatal shootings of unarmed people of color and really, really violent types of interactions that result in loss of life in our community. And then I'm not trying to justify our interactions as being better than any other community, but what I'm saying, relatively, our police department does a better job than most large urban areas in helping to police this community. They need your support and collaboration in order to reduce the violence. We'll also be looking at that as part of the police department strategic plan. What can we do to be more proactive and preventive in reducing violent crimes, particularly gun crimes in this community? And so I implore with you to cooperate and to partner with our police department and make sure that we responsibly make sure that Grand Rapids is a safe place for everyone at all times.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. When we think about policing, we do need a holistic approach. You know, I think about all of the calls that we get, and we need to focus on violence prevention. In fact, the City Commission has talked about that for quite some time. It is time for us to move forward with an evidence-based violence prevention program that is robust. We need to look at the responses of the calls that we get where we can respond better, that may not need a police officer. And that's why I appreciate the work the city manager and the department, both the police department and the fire department has done around building a homeless outreach team. We know that there's a lot of folks who are experiencing homelessness and they don't necessarily need a police officer to show up. And so what we're doing is we're working really closely to add some mental health and behavioral health specialists to that team who can respond better and to work in partnership with our nonprofits. So we need to look at how do we respond better to those calls that may not need a police officer, where it takes up a lot of their time. And then how do we make sure that when somebody calls 911 and they need a police officer to show up, that an officer is able to get there and get there quickly. And so that's the work ahead of us. And I'm eager to see the strategic plan that the chief is working on, because I do believe it's going to lay out how do we better respond in every single one of those issues.
And I know some people have asked, well, why do you need to go through that strategic planning effort? Well, let me ask many of you who may have the answers that I don't have right away. What part of the police department do you no longer want to see? Is it the detective unit that helps to solve the crimes? Is it the vice unit that helps to respond to some of the illegal activity that you call? Is it cutting more patrol officers? Is it cutting from the dispatchers from 911? Is it cutting from the community engagement unit? Is it cutting from the customer service from the people who are receiving the complaints? What specific area of the department would you cut? And that's a hard question to answer. It's easy to suggest it. And so there are no easy answers. And just saying defund the police is not a strategy. It's one of the aspirational things. And so my intention my goal is to improve policing outcomes. And in order to do that, we have to be very, very deliberate about what we do, because we don't want to seemingly appear to fix one thing and cause something else to be worse. So I ask that this commission trust its staff, its city manager, who has not been here 20 years or 30 years as you've been talking about the problem, but who's been here a year and a half opposing and implementing solutions, that you trust your new police chief that has barely been here a year in being able to have an opportunity to be responsive to some of the things that have really surfaced since May 30th in this community. And you've seen that we've not just been talking, but we've been doing. There are commitments to reform, but we need to do it in a responsible way, in a sustainable way, in a very thoughtful way. The other thing I want to be clear on, we talk about Black life mattering and not wanting to address these systemic issues of color, of racism. And if you have a sizable reduction in a department like the police department, the way that the contracts are structured, the last hired will be the first fired. So all of the diversity, the strides in diversity that the department has made in recent years could very well be undone at the officer level with significant reductions. I don't know what that is. I'm told that that would be the case, but I need to be able to thoroughly, systematically evaluate that so we know what intended consequences and unintended consequences are in making such a decision.
And we'll wrap up. I think we're a little over time, so just a couple final thoughts in our work around equity. If you haven't had a chance to look at our strategic plan, I encourage you to do that because the City Commission spent a significant amount of time at the end of last year with our city manager creating a strategic plan. And we know that there are disparate outcomes in a lot of areas in our city, from housing to economic development, to access to opportunity, to access to capital, to business ownership, to wealth generation. And in our strategic plan, we clearly laid out goals, and in every single goal, we talked about and we identified equitable outcomes. Even in environmental sustainability, we know that individuals in our community, that there are environmental justice issues. And so when we talk about eliminating racial disparities and addressing systemic racism, it's not just in policing or in corrections, but we need to do that across the board. And that's what we're committed to doing. And hopefully some of that you've seen in our work, whether it was, as I said earlier, around cannabis, the work we're doing with Housing Next around housing. We're committed to this work. It's not easy, as the city manager said. It's complex work. It doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen when people stay engaged and stay at the table, and they take the time to really think through what we need to do to move forward and to operationalize a lot of what we plan to do.